My mom once looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth the investment, especially not when it came to my own medical treatment. In that moment, something inside me broke, and something else woke up. My name is Kendall Parker, and I never imagined the woman who raised me would be the reason I learned to survive on my own. This isn't just about illness or money. It's about control, pride, and what happens when love comes with a price tag. Growing up in our small house in Indiana, I thought every family lived the way we did. I thought silence was normal. I thought love was something you earned by staying out of the way. Mom ran the house like a perfectly wound clock. Every decision passed through her. Every dollar had a purpose. Every word had a weight. The air always smelled like strong coffee and lemon cleaning spray, and there was this unspoken rule that noise meant trouble. Laughter was rare. Questions were risky. Emotions unnecessary. She wasn't cruel in the way people imagine. She didn't scream without reason or throw things across the room. It was quieter than that, colder. She believed discipline built strong people. She believed feelings made you weak. And in her world, weakness had no place. My older sister Kennedy fit that world perfectly. Kennedy always looked polished, like she'd stepped out of a catalog. Her hair brushed smooth, her clothes pressed her smile ready for school photos and church gatherings. Mom loved presenting her to the world. Graceful, she'd say, smart, composed. Every compliment landed softly on Kennedy and sharply on me. I was the other one, the extra pair of hands, the useful daughter. From the time I could hold a broom, Mom taught me that a girl's job was to contribute, not complain. Be useful, not needy, she'd say whenever I hesitated. So I scrubbed floors until my knees ached. I folded laundry with careful corners. I started dinner before she even had to ask. Kennedy would come home, late from dance practice, glitter still clinging to her shoes, and Mom would beam at her like she'd hung the moon. I'd stand in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand, wondering what it felt like to be looked at like that. It didn't matter if I was tired. It didn't matter if I wasn't feeling well. The expectation was simple: keep going. And the less I asked for, the less I seemed to exist. That's the strange thing about growing up in a house like that. You start to measure your worth in chores completed, in how quiet you can be, in how little space you take up. I convinced myself that if I worked harder, if I anticipated her needs before she spoke them, maybe one day she'd look at me the way she looked at Kennedy. Maybe one day I'd be enough. When I first started feeling sick, I ignored it. My body felt heavy all the time, like I was dragging something invisible behind me. My hands would tremble when I held a glass. At school, the words on the page blurred together and I'd blink hard, trying to force them back into focus. I told myself it was exhaustion. Of course I was tired. I did everything. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One night, after staring at my homework for nearly an hour without understanding a single sentence, I walked into the living room where Mom was reviewing paperwork at the table. My heart was pounding harder than it should have been. "I don't feel good," I said quietly. "I can't focus at school. I think something's wrong." She didn't even look up. "That's your problem, not mine." Just like that. No pause, no concern, no follow-up question. The words landed heavier than I expected. It wasn't yelling, it wasn't dramatic, it was dismissal, clean and final. I stood there for a moment, waiting for her to change her mind, waiting for her to glance up and really see me. But she just turned a page and kept working. That was the night something shifted inside me. It wasn't that she brushed me off that had happened before. It was a certainty in her voice, the way she made it clear that my pain was an inconvenience, a distraction from more important things. After that, I stopped bringing things to her. I stopped mentioning headaches. I stopped talking about how tired I felt. I learned to rely on silence and endurance, the two things that never disappointed me. If I needed something, I told myself to figure it out alone. The house began to feel smaller after that, the walls closer, my thoughts louder. I would stay late at school or hide in the library, pretending to study long after I'd finished my assignments, just to delay going home. Because at home, love wasn't something you received. It was something you proved you deserved, and I kept trying to prove it. I started staying at the library after school because it was the one place that didn't ask anything from me. No chores, no comparisons, no tight silence pressing against my chest. Just rows of books, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and the quiet turning of pages. That's where I met Ethan Cole. At first, he was just another student who seemed to linger longer than everyone else. He'd sit 2 tables away, headphones in stacks of textbooks spread out in careful order. I didn't think much of him until I noticed he was noticing me. Not in a loud way, not in the way boys sometimes do. He noticed the small things. The way my hand shook slightly when I flipped a page. The way I avoided eye contact whenever someone nearby raised their voice. The way I stayed late shelving books that weren't even my responsibility just to delay going home. He never called attention to it. He never asked what's wrong, like he expected a confession. He just showed up. If I stayed late, he stayed late. If I worked in silence, he didn't try to fill it. Sometimes we talked about music or classes or where we thought we'd end up after graduation. Other times, we just existed in the same space, and somehow that felt steady. There was something about him that didn't feel like evaluation. I wasn't being measured. I wasn't being compared. One afternoon, I forgot my jacket. Indiana winters don't forgive mistakes like that. When we stepped outside, the air hit me, sharp and sudden. I tried to pretend I wasn't cold, wrapping my arms around myself like it was enough. Ethan noticed immediately. Without making a big deal of it, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. It was still warm from him. I remember freezing, not from the cold, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being taken care of. "You always take care of everyone else," he said softly. "Let someone take care of you for once." I didn't know how to respond. Kindness like that felt almost dangerous. My first instinct was to hand it back, to insist I was fine. That's what I'd been trained to say. "I'm fine. I don't need anything. I've got it handled." But something in his voice, steady, unforced, made it hard to push away. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as the quiet daughter, not as the less impressive sister, not as someone who had to earn her place in the room. Just seen. It's strange how one small gesture can begin to unravel years of belief. I had spent my life thinking worth was something you proved through effort, obedience, sacrifice. That love was a reward for usefulness. Ethan didn't challenge that with arguments or grand declarations. He challenged it by simply being consistent, by offering care without asking for anything in return. And without realizing it, that afternoon in the cold became the first crack in the story I'd been telling myself. Maybe I didn't have to earn everything. Maybe I was allowed to receive. By the end of winter, the house started to feel different. Not louder, not softer, just unstable. Like something invisible had cracked beneath the foundation, and we were all pretending not to hear it. Mom came home one evening, later than usual, her coat half-buttoned, her expression unreadable. I was sitting at the dining table sorting through a stack of medical bills I hadn't figured out how to pay. The numbers blurred together, appointments, tests, prescriptions. Each envelope felt heavier than the last. She dropped her purse on the counter. They let me go, just like that. 15 years at the same bank, gone in a sentence. Cutbacks restructuring words that sounded clinical and distant, but landed in our kitchen like a storm. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the window, staring into the dark as if the answer might be waiting out there. The silence stretched until it felt like it might snap. The next morning, I heard her on the phone with the mortgage company. At first, her voice was firm, controlled. Then it wavered. Words like extension and grace period floated through the walls. I sat on my bed, listening, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. After that, she stopped talking to me altogether. It was as if my presence reminded her of what she couldn't fix. Then Kennedy came home from Chicago. When she walked through the door, perfume and shopping bags in hand, Mom's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. It was like the sun had decided to visit our living room again. Kennedy filled the house with noise, phone calls, music, the click of online orders labeled necessary comforts. Within a week, she had taken over my old room without asking. Mom didn't protest. She didn't mention the credit card statements stacking up on the counter. She just watched, tired, as if clinging to Kennedy's presence was easier than confronting reality. Meanwhile, my medical expenses kept rising. The letters from the hospital came more frequently now. I tried hiding them in my backpack under my mattress between textbooks, but Mom always found them. One night, she tossed an unopened envelope onto the table in front of me. "You're an adult," she said flatly. "Handle it. I'm drained." Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't even angry. It was empty, like someone who had run out of energy to care about anything beyond survival. I nodded because that's what I did. I nodded and swallowed whatever was rising in my throat. It wasn't rage I felt. It was resignation. I understood then that she didn't see me as her responsibility anymore. Maybe she never had. And with the mortgage hanging over her head, I had slipped even further down the list of priorities. Ethan was the only one who seemed to notice how quickly everything was unraveling. One evening, he picked me up from work and asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. I told him about Mom losing her job, about the mortgage, about the bills piling up on my desk like accusations. He listened without interrupting, his hands steady on the steering wheel. Then he said quietly, "You should start a fundraiser. Let people help you." The idea hit me like a spotlight. Ask for help. Put my illness online. Expose the cracks in our family to strangers. My first instinct was panic. I had spent my whole life trying to take up less space, to prove I wasn't needy. And now, he was suggesting I admit publicly that I couldn't do this alone. That night I sat in front of my laptop staring at a blank screen. The cursor blinked patient and accusing. For hours I typed a sentence and deleted it. Typed another, closed the tab, opened it again. My hands shook, the way they did when I was overtired. Only this wasn't exhaustion, it was fear. What if people thought I was dramatic? What if they believed I was exaggerating? What if mom found out? But underneath the fear was something else, a quiet truth. I needed help, so I started writing. Not like a plea, not like a performance. Just the truth, the diagnosis, the appointments, the way illness had crept into my life and strained everything around it. I wrote about trying to manage it alone, about wanting a chance to heal without drowning in debt. When I finished, I didn't let myself reread it. I hit post before I could change my mind. At first, nothing happened. The silence after sharing something so personal felt unbearable. I closed the laptop and sat on my bed, convinced I'd made a mistake. Then my phone buzzed. One notification, then another. A small donation, a short message. Praying for you. Another one. I went through something similar. You're not alone. The messages kept coming. Some were brief. Some were long and deeply personal strangers sharing their own battles, their own scars. People I had never met were sending encouragement, telling me they believed I deserved to heal. Donations began small, $5, $10. Then larger amounts appeared. Within days, hundreds of people had contributed. I sat cross-legged on my bed, scrolling through the list of names, tears slipping down before I realized I was crying. Gratitude and grief tangled together inside me. I was thankful, overwhelmed even, but I was also heartbroken because compassion had arrived from strangers and not from the people who were supposed to love me first. When Ethan called to ask how I felt, I told him the truth. I don't know. For the first time in years, I felt supported, but not by my own family. And that realization was both healing and devastating. Spring didn't arrive gently that year. It came with tension thick enough to taste. I walked into the house one afternoon and knew something was wrong before anyone spoke. Mom was sitting at the dining table, her laptop open in front of her. Her jaw was tight, her fingers still on the keyboard as if she'd frozen mid-click. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" she asked without looking up. My stomach dropped. She turned the screen toward me. My fundraiser page glowed back at us, the title sitting there like a confession under bright light. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "You embarrass me," she said, her voice low but trembling. "Do you have any idea what people in town will think? That we're beggars? That I can't provide for my own daughter? It wasn't about you I managed. I didn't do it to shame you. I needed help. You had no right to tell strangers about our family," she snapped. "Our problems are private. Private." As if silence had ever healed anything. Before I could respond, Kennedy appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. She'd clearly been listening. "Well," she said lightly, a smirk tugging at her mouth, "I guess you finally found a way to profit from being dramatic." The words hit harder than I expected. "I'm not being dramatic," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "It's medical. It's real." Kennedy rolled her eyes. "You've always loved attention. Guess now you're getting paid for it." I felt that familiar tightening in my throat. The same feeling from childhood when defending myself only made things worse. Mom closed the laptop slowly. "How much?" she asked. I hesitated. "What? How much money have they given you?" The question didn't sound like concern. It sounded like calculation. I told her. Her expression changed just slightly. The anger softened at the edges, replaced by something cooler. Measured. "That's a lot of money to keep in your own account," she said carefully. "You're not experienced with finances. You could mismanage it." "It's for my treatment," I replied. "That's what people donated for." She gave me a tight smile. "Which is exactly why I should handle it." to make sure it's used properly. There it was. Control. It's in my name, I said, quietly. It's my fundraiser. And you're living under my roof, she shot back. Don't forget that. The room felt smaller by the second. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. If you insist on keeping it, then the least you can do is contribute to this household. The mortgage doesn't pay itself. You live here too. I stared at her. You want me to use my medical donations to pay the mortgage? You want to stay here for free, she countered. We're all making sacrifices. Sacrifices. I thought about the hospital bills, the test results, the nights I couldn't sleep because my body felt like it was turning against me. I thought about strangers sending $5 at a time, saying they believed I deserved to heal. And now this. That evening Ethan came over. I had called him earlier, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what had happened. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, if maybe I was being selfish. When he walked into the living room, Mom was watching television. Kennedy scrolled on her phone beside her as if nothing had happened. Ethan sat beside me but didn't crowd me. He didn't speak until Mom muted the TV and looked at him with open irritation. I understand there's some confusion about the fundraiser, he began calmly. There's no confusion, Mom said sharply. My daughter made a very public mistake. With respect, he replied, steady and measured. The donations were given specifically for Kendall's medical treatment. There are legal and ethical expectations tied to that. Using them for anything else, like a mortgage, could create serious problems. Mom's eyes narrowed. Who are you to lecture me about my daughter's money? It's not your daughter's money, he said, gently glancing at me. It's hers. The silence that followed felt electric. Kennedy let out a short laugh. Of course she has a man defending her now. That's new. I felt heat rise to my face, but Ethan didn't react. Mom stood up abruptly. You think you understand what I have sacrificed? I gave her life. I kept this family together, and this is how she repays me, by parading our struggles online. Her words blurred together after that. Sacrifice, ungrateful, disrespectful. I'd heard versions of it my entire life, but this time, something inside me didn't collapse the way it usually did. It clarified. There was no version of this conversation where I would be right. No apology that would be enough. No explanation that would change how they saw me. Love here had always come with conditions. Be useful, be quiet. Don't embarrass us, don't need too much. And when I stopped meeting those conditions, when I needed something real, the love vanished. Ethan's hand found mine, just a small squeeze. Steady, present. Mom was still talking, her voice rising and falling, but it sounded distant now, like noise from another room. For the first time, I wasn't trying to win the argument. I was seeing it clearly. If I stayed, I would always owe something. My health, my privacy, my independence. There would always be a price. I think I said, slowly, surprised by how calm I sounded. It's time I move out. The room went quiet. Kennedy scoffed. With what money? Mom didn't respond. She just stared at me as if trying to decide whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. I felt it settle in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Certainty. I walked to my room, closed the door, and looked around at the small space that had never really felt like mine. My clothes fit into one suitcase, a few books, a photo or two I wasn't even sure I wanted. The house was silent as I packed. No one came to stop me. No one asked me to stay. And somehow that hurt less than I expected, because the truth had already done its damage. Love that has to be earned isn't love. It's a contract. And I was finally done signing it. 2 days later, I walked out of that house with one suitcase and a heartbeat. that wouldn't slow down. Ethan was waiting by his car. He didn't say anything dramatic. No speeches. No, "I told you so." He just opened the trunk, took my bag, and gave me a look that said, "I'm here." The drive to his apartment felt quieter than I expected. Not heavy, just final. Like a door had closed somewhere behind me, and even if I turned around, it wouldn't open the same way again. His place was small, one bedroom near campus, cream-colored walls, a faint smell of coffee that seemed permanently woven into the air. When I stepped inside, the silence startled me. It wasn't the tight, watchful silence of my mother's house. It was open, uncertain, almost fragile. I set my suitcase down against the wall and sat on the edge of the couch. For a moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel brave. I felt like someone standing on the edge of a cliff with no map. That night, it rained softly against the windows. Ethan made soup from instant noodles and leftover vegetables, and we ate at the small kitchen table without saying much. The refrigerator hummed in the background. The world outside kept moving, and for the first time in months, I slept without waking up afraid. The peace didn't last untouched. The next morning, my phone lit up with a long message from Mom. It filled the entire screen, line after line of accusation. "You betrayed your family. You humiliated me in front of neighbors. You turned strangers against your own blood." Every sentence felt like a stone thrown in my direction. I read it twice, hoping maybe I'd misunderstood the tone. I hadn't. There was no apology, no curiosity about whether I was safe, just shame. I turned off my phone. Responding would only reopen something she had no intention of healing. A few days later, Kennedy found her own way to reach me. A friend sent me a screenshot of her social media post. It was a picture of my fundraiser page cropped just enough to make it look suspicious. Her caption read, "Some people will do anything for sympathy, even steal from those who help them." The comments flooded in. Is this true? Did she fake it? That's messed up. My hands shook as I scrolled. Friends from school started texting, asking what was going on. I tried to explain, but how do you defend yourself when your own sister is the one tearing you apart? It wasn't just embarrassment. It was betrayal layered on top of betrayal. Ethan saw the look on my face and gently took the phone from my hands. "We'll fix this," he said, steady as always. That evening, he contacted a lawyer, a woman named Ms. Harlow, who specialized in digital fraud and online disputes. Her office was small, lined with books, and framed certificates that glowed under soft lighting. She read through my fundraiser page, the donation records, the medical documentation I'd carefully saved. When she looked up, her voice was firm. "You've done nothing wrong. Everything here is transparent and properly documented, but the internet can be cruel. Lies travel faster than truth." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until my eyes started to burn. It wasn't just about legality. It was about someone in authority saying I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't a fraud. I was a patient trying to survive. The weeks that followed were quieter. Ethan picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop near the university. I found a part-time job at a bookstore surrounded by the comforting smell of paper and ink. During the day, I worked. In between, I went to appointments. At night, I organized every receipt into a folder, proof that every dollar from the fundraiser went exactly where it was meant to go. We budgeted carefully. Groceries were simple. Rent was split down the middle. There were no luxuries, but there was something steadier than comfort: choice. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about the house I left behind, about whether Mom ever stood in my empty room, about whether Kennedy still scrolled through comments defending a story that wasn't true. The anger I expected to feel never fully settled. Instead, something quieter took its place. Acceptance. I couldn't control what they said, but for the first time, I was building something that didn't require their permission. Months passed before karma knocked on the door I used to call home. Ethan and I had just finished dinner when my phone buzzed. A message from a former neighbor. Short, almost hesitant. They came today. Men from the bank. They're seizing the property. I read it twice before it sank in. That house had once been everything. Our pride, our battlefield, our silence. The porch Mom decorated every spring. The kitchen table where every argument echoed. And now it was being taken back, piece by piece. The bank had finally foreclosed. I sat there, staring at the screen, waiting for anger to rise, waiting for vindication, for that sharp sense of, I told you so. It didn't come. What I felt instead was something heavier, final. A week later, I drove past the neighborhood. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see it with my own eyes. The lawn was overgrown, the windows boarded, the paint along the trim already beginning to peel. Kennedy was standing outside, arguing into her phone. She looked thinner, her hair pulled back carelessly. Even from across the street, I could see the strain in her posture. Later, I heard she'd lost her job and moved back in with Mom, but they didn't last long under the same roof. Neighbors whispered about shouting matches that carried into the street. Pride, it seemed, had finally met its limit. The town talked the way small towns always do, but their whispers didn't feel satisfying. They felt like echoes. One afternoon, as I was locking up the bookstore, Mr. Lewis approached me. He'd lived next door to us for more than 20 years, a retired accountant with soft eyes and a careful way of speaking. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, glancing around as if the trees might be listening. We stepped aside. "Your mother came to me months ago," he continued quietly. "She said she needed help refinancing the mortgage. Asked me to look over some paperwork." My chest tightened. When I reviewed the documents, he said I noticed something. The personal loan attached to it. It was under your name, your social security number. The world tilted. "That's not possible," I said automatically. "I never signed anything." "I know," he replied gently. "That's why I didn't agree to witness it. I kept a copy. I thought you might need it." He handed me a small envelope. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. Inside were copies of loan documents, my name printed neatly at the top. A signature that looked similar enough to pass at a glance. Default notices dated months back. My credit could have been destroyed without me even knowing. I stood there on the sidewalk, the paper trembling in my hands. There was a time when I would have refused to believe it, would have defended her automatically. But this time the denial didn't last. She would have. Gratitude and grief collided inside me. Gratitude for Mr. Lewis. Grief for the fact that this no longer shocked me. The next morning, Ethan drove me to the bank. I remember how steady he looked compared to how unsteady I felt. We met with the branch manager. I explained that I had never authorized the loan. I showed them the documents Mr. Lewis had saved. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They opened an investigation immediately. 2 weeks later, I received confirmation the fraudulent account had been closed, the default removed, my credit record cleared. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like cleaning a wound. Necessary, painful, not something you celebrate. Ethan squeezed my hand when I told him the news. "You did the right thing," he said. I nodded. But justice didn't feel triumphant. It felt like another layer of truth, peeling back another reminder that some betrayals don't explode. They unravel quietly. The call came just after dusk. Kendall stared at her phone as it vibrated against the kitchen counter of the small apartment she now shared with Ethan. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. "Mom." For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. But something in her old reflex, old hope, made her swipe to answer. Her mother's voice was unrecognizable. No sharpness, no controlled superiority, just frayed exhaustion. "Kendall, I need help." The words fell heavily between them. Kendall leaned against the counter, gripping the edge. In the background, she could hear the hollow echo of an unfamiliar space. No warmth, no familiar kitchen sounds. The house was gone, the mortgage unpaid. Kennedy had left town after the whispers grew too loud. Everything her mother had clung to status, appearance, control had unraveled. "They're saying I could face charges," her mother continued, voice trembling. "I don't have anywhere to go. I thought, maybe you and Ethan, maybe you could loan me something. Just until I get back on my feet." There it was. Not "I'm sorry," not "I hurt you," just need. Kendall closed her eyes. For years, she had believed love was something you earned by absorbing damage quietly. That if she endured enough, sacrificed enough, proved her worth enough, she might finally be chosen. But she had learned something different now. Love that only shows up when it needs something isn't love. It's dependency dressed as obligation. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, drawn by the tension in her posture. He didn't interrupt. He simply placed a steady hand at the small of her back, present grounding. Her mother kept talking. "You're doing better now, right? People sent you money. You always were the responsible one. I know you'll understand." Understand. The same word her mother used whenever Kendall was expected to carry something too heavy. Kendall swallowed. "I do understand," she said quietly. Her mother exhaled in relief. "I understand that you're scared." Silence on the other end. "But I can't fix this for you." The relief vanished, replaced by sharp disbelief. "You'd let your own mother end up like this." Kendall's pulse quickened, but she didn't retreat. "I'm not letting anything happen to you," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You made choices, and I've spent most of my life paying for them." Her mother's breathing grew louder. "So this is revenge." The word stung, but it didn't land. "No," Kendall said softly. "This is peace." Behind her, Ethan's hand pressed gently, supportive but not guiding. The choice was hers alone. "I forgive you," Kendall continued, and the truth of it surprised even her. "I'm not holding anger anymore, but forgiveness doesn't mean I rescue you. It doesn't mean I go back to being responsible for everything." Her mother didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice had hardened, slipping back into familiar accusation. "I raised you, and I survived," Kendall replied. Not cruel, just clear. Tears blurred her vision, but they felt different from the ones she used to cry. These weren't from helplessness, they were from release. "I hope you find a way forward," she said, "but I can't be it." The silence that followed was long and final. Then the line disconnected. Kendall lowered the phone slowly. Her chest ached not from guilt, but from grief. Grief for the mother she wished she had. Grief for the version of herself who would have emptied her bank account without hesitation. Ethan turned her gently toward him. "You okay?" She nodded, though tears slipped free. "I thought saying no would feel cruel," she admitted. "But it doesn't. It feels like choosing yourself," he said. And that was the difference. Kendall rested her forehead against his chest, breathing in the steady rhythm of someone who loved her without condition, without transaction. She had not chosen revenge. She had chosen boundaries. And for the first time in her life, peace felt stronger than obligation. Graduation arrived quietly, without the chaos that had once defined Kendall's milestones. When she walked across the stage to receive her degree in public health, there was no dramatic reconciliation in the audience, no tense glances over shoulders. Just Ethan standing near the back, clapping with that same steady pride he had always shown her. Never loud, never performative, just unwavering. This time she wasn't graduating to prove she was worthy. She was graduating because she had built something solid from the wreckage. The scholarship letter came 2 weeks later. Full tuition, research funding, a future that didn't depend on survival instincts, but on purpose. Kendall sat at their small kitchen table rereading the email, hands trembling not from fear this time, but from relief. For so long, stability had felt fragile. Now it felt earned. Ethan finished his medical program that same season. The nights of studying at the cramped desk, the early hospital rotations, the careful budgeting, they had weathered all of it together. No grand speeches, no dramatic turning points, just persistence, just choosing each other every day. To celebrate, they drove to the coast. The air smelled like salt and distance. Kendall kicked off her shoes and let the tide wash over her ankles, laughing when the water surprised her with its chill. She felt lighter there, unburdened by history, untethered from old expectations. They walked along the shoreline at sunset, the sky turning soft shades of rose and gold. Ethan grew quieter than usual, his hand laced through hers. "Kendall," he said, stopping where the waves curled gently over the sand. She turned toward him, heart steady, not bracing for loss. "I've watched you rebuild your life with courage I don't think you even see," he continued. "You taught me what strength looks like when it's quiet." He knelt in the damp sand. The world didn't explode into applause. There were no cameras, no audience. Just the ocean, the wind, and the certainty in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Kendall didn't feel rescued. She felt chosen and ready. "Yes," she whispered, as the tide rolled in around them, carrying away the last remnants of who she used to be. The wedding took place in the university garden where Kendall had once studied between classes, the same paths where she learned to believe in a future she could build herself. White chairs lined the lawn, sunlight filtering through late spring leaves. It was intimate friends, professors, a few hospital colleagues of Ethan's. There were 2 empty spaces no one mentioned. Her mother did not come. Kennedy had left town months ago, chasing quieter places where whispers wouldn't follow. Kendall felt their absence like a faint echo, but not a wound. When it was her turn to speak, she didn't look at the empty seats. "Love," she said, voice steady in the warm air, "is choice, not blood." The words weren't bitter. They were clear. She understood now that her mother's harshness had been fear. Fear of losing control, of losing image, of losing relevance. but fear had never been an excuse for harm. After the ceremony, she and Ethan announced the small scholarship fund they had created, seeded with her award money and his first physician paycheck, to support students navigating medical hardship without family support. It wasn't a grand gesture, it was quiet continuity. As twilight settled over the garden, Kendall felt something settle inside her too. Forgiveness was not reunion, it was release. And real love was steady chosen peace. Sometimes the bravest thing we do isn't fighting harder, it's choosing ourselves. Kendall learned that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means refusing to let it define your worth. Family isn't always who shares your blood, it's who shows up, stays steady, and chooses you back. If you've ever had to choose yourself, I'd love to hear what it taught you. Share your story below and stay with us for more journeys like this.